Glad you can join us. Here's what we have for you this Monday. Donald Trump's threats over Greenland overtake the World Economic Forum.
I think everyone should take the president at his word.
The foreign policy balancing act for NATO allies.
There's going to be a huge price to pay for Canada and for average Canadians.
What Canada stands to gain or lose if troops are sent to the island.
It's a snow day, school's closed.
A lot of power outages.
Plus, weathering the storm after a powerful nor'easter roars into Atlantic Canada.
CTV National News with Sandy Ronaldo.
Well, Mark Carney and Donald Trump will likely run into each other at the World Economic Forum in Davos, Switzerland this week as the U.S. president, according to NBC News, ratchets up his criticism of Canada behind the scenes. Now, he is said to be fixated on this country's inability to defend the Arctic. It's the same argument he's using for acquiring Greenland. CTV's Annie Bergeron-Oliver is in Davos, the third stop on the Prime Minister's trip to shore up global trade ties and move away from depending on the Americans. Annie.
Sandy, the Prime Minister is one of a record 400 top political leaders in Davos for the World Economic Forum. But it's one leader who's not even there yet, Donald Trump, who is dominating the conversation and raising the tension. Prime Minister Mark Carney will kickstart his time at the World Economic Forum with a fireside chat tomorrow and a speech later in the day all about what he calls the New World Order and Canada's approach. Expect him to talk about trade and the importance of diversifying Canada's trading partner, a message he has been spreading throughout this trip. But while trade and the economy may be topics the leaders here want to talk about, geopolitics and Trump's latest tariff threats are quickly taking over. A number of the 8 EU leaders facing Trump tariffs over Greenland will be at the World Economic Forum, including French President Emmanuel Macron tomorrow, who Carney will be meeting with. Right now, there is no indication that Trump and Carney will be meeting, but they will be in Davos at the same time. The Prime Minister has said if he runs into Trump, he will raise his concerns about Greenland and the fact that Canada stands with Denmark and Greenland. Sandy.
Okay, Annie, thank you. Now, a senior government source tells CTV News that Ottawa is thinking about sending a small contingent of soldiers to participate in NATO training exercises in Greenland. CTV senior political correspondent Mike LeCouture now on the balancing act as Trump threatens additional tariffs on other EU countries over this. Mike.
Well, Sandy, a senior government source tells CTV News a final decision on troop deployment has not been made, but it would likely be small and symbolic.
The picturesque landscape of Greenland could soon host a handful of Canadian soldiers. The members of our military would participate in training exercises with a number of European allies.
They framed it as a long-planned military exercise.
Canada's former ambassador to NATO says these deployments were originally planned to deter Russian action, but it could have the same effect on President Trump.
Trump is taking it as a message, and perhaps, unspoken, the allies will think of that as a way of changing Trump's risk calculus.
Canada's troop commitment would likely be less than the dozen soldiers Germany is sending to Greenland. Still, there could be blowback for Canada, as U.S. President Donald Trump is threatening tariffs on any ally that sends troops.
Just to show the Americans that, you can't push around a NATO ally and threaten to take over a country against their will.
Now, to minimize the political fallout, some suggest appealing to Trump in a different way.
Try to turn the tables a little bit and say, let's all be in this together when it comes to the defense of the Arctic in North America, rather than make it appear as if somehow we're marshaling a force to defend Greenland from the Americans.
NBC News is also reporting Trump is complaining to aides about Canada's vulnerability in the Arctic. That's despite Canada already committing $6 billion to an over-the-horizon radar system for the far north.
We have to do more in our Arctic, but we also have to be kind of calm. More important thing is to work with our Arctic allies to deter and to get ready for any threat.
But the source of that threat in a rapidly changing geopolitical landscape depends on where you are in the world. Sandy?
All right, Mike, thank you. Let's bring in CTV's chief political correspondent, Vassy Kapelas. And Vassy, the feds have to be weighing the risk of upsetting Donald Trump by sending additional troops to Greenland. So how are they going to tiptoe around that?
Yeah, it's an incredibly difficult challenge, Sandy, and I think you frame it exactly right. That essentially any move that Canada makes right now on a host of geopolitical issues, and we saw evidence of that last week in China, has the potential, not necessarily the guarantee, but the potential to have an impact on trade negotiations with the United States. And let's not forget that those trade negotiations will take in the coming weeks and months a very formal and significant perspective in the form of the review of the CUSMA or the USMCA free trade agreement. So it's all very important that whatever we do, we get it right. I will say I was speaking to a number of diplomats from other countries today, and to pick off where Peter McKay and Mike's story left off, there are conversations happening behind the scenes about Canada taking on a leadership role, the Prime Minister essentially capitalizing on some of his personal relationship with President Trump to try and bring down the temperature. Perhaps Canada can again, start a conversation with the Prime Minister that leads to a different conclusion than the one we've seen materialize so far. So we'll keep our eyes posted for that. Sandy?
Okay, Vashi, thank you.
I spoke to President Trump, and evidently there are a lot of inbounds, and I think everyone should take the president at his word.
Scott Bessent, the U.S. Secretary of the Treasury in Davos, reaffirming the American president's position on Greenland. Now, Mr. Trump is not just annoyed at the pushback, but also angry at Norway for not giving him the Nobel Peace Prize, and he's tied the two together. CTV's Washington Bureau Chief Joy Malbon now on the swirling crisis and the messages that Donald Trump has written. Okay, Joy, where to start?
Where indeed, Sandy. Look, it's clear that the president is still smarting. He is still bitter over the Nobel Peace Prize, resulting in an extraordinary exchange of messages between two world leaders.
Donald Trump in a remarkable exchange lashing out at Norway's Prime Minister, writing, "Dear Jonas, considering your country decided not to give me the Nobel Peace Prize for having stopped 8 wars plus, I no longer feel an obligation to think purely of peace." Trump goes on to say Denmark can't protect Greenland from Russia or China, questioning Danish ownership, insisting the world is not secure unless we have complete and total control of Greenland. Protesting over the weekend, Greenlanders wore their own version of MAGA hats saying, "Make America go away." Still, the president refuses to rule out military force to seize the Danish-owned Arctic island.
It is not easy when we wake up every morning to new threats. There are red lines which can't be crossed. This is a matter of basic principles, and we are living in 2026 where you can trade with people, but you can't trade people.
European leaders blasted Trump's actions, saying they won't be blackmailed by Trump's tariff threats. NATO nations coming to Greenland's defense, sending in ships and fighter jets as a show of support.
I think that this can be resolved and should be resolved through calm discussion, who decides the future of Greenland, and making clear that the use of tariffs in this way is completely wrong.
Trump says Europe should focus on Russia and Ukraine, not Greenland. Whatever's driving the president, even some Republicans are unnerved.
For him to militarily invade would turn Article 5 of NATO on its very head and, in essence, put us at war with NATO itself.
It seems, Sandy, the only praise for President Trump's territorial ambitions, it's coming from the Kremlin, saying that Trump will go down in history if he does take Greenland. Sandy?
All right. Joy, as always, thank you. Joy's in Washington. Police in Australia are investigating the death of a 19-year-old Canadian woman. Her body was discovered this morning near a popular tourist site. The woman was found unresponsive on a beach in Gowrie, an island off the country's east coast. 2 men driving by saw a pack of wild dogs near the body. Authorities say it's too early to know if the dingoes were involved in the death. An Australian boy is fighting for his life after being savagely attacked by a shark.
It was a horrendous scene at the time when police attended. We believe it was something like a bull shark that attacked the lower limbs of that boy yesterday.
The 12-year-old and some friends were at a beach in Sydney. Police say his buddies pulled him out of the water. Now, first responders performed CPR and first aid. The child remains in critical condition with severe injuries to both legs. The death toll from a deadly train crash in Spain has risen to at least 40, with dozens more injured. It happened when a Madrid-bound train derailed and the tail end crossed over the opposite tracks, colliding with another train. Experts say a faulty rail joint may have played a role in the crash. Spain's Prime Minister has declared 3 days of mourning. Well, doctors in Vancouver and Toronto have issued a warning as the FIFA World Cup approaches. Now, they are concerned that the country's healthcare system will collapse if there's a major emergency during the games, with tens of thousands of visitors expected. CTV's Heather Wright on the warning signs and the dangers that lie ahead. Heather.
Well, Sandy, the healthcare system is frequently over capacity. Add in 300,000 soccer fans, and there are concerns it might buckle. As Toronto and Vancouver prepare to host the beautiful game, some doctors are calling out the ugly reality of large events.
My main concern as an emergency physician is healthcare system capacity.
Dr. Catherine Varner says there are serious vulnerabilities in the healthcare system that need to be addressed before hundreds of thousands of soccer fans arrive in Toronto and Vancouver later this year. She warns if there is a mass casualty event, the system might not be able to handle it.
At the Lapu Lapu Festival last year, those tragic events, the shooting that occurred at the Raptors parade, and working in the emergency department those nights in the World Series, I was just holding my breath, hoping that nothing like that happened, because we had so little capacity to move patients in the event of an external disaster.
In a separate risk assessment, Public Health Ontario warns that measles, foodborne illnesses, and COVID-19 pose moderate health risks for the World Cup. Today at a Toronto City Committee meeting, some councillors urged provincial and federal governments to step up and help with added costs like health care.
So we're hoping that our partners and other orders of government will continue to be at the table with us and really taking a serious look about their financial responsibilities.
Today, Ontario's premier was asked if the province would invest more into healthcare ahead of the tournament, but didn't address any tournament-specific funding.
Well, we've invested more into our healthcare system than anyone, over $93 billion. We've registered over 16,000 doctors, 100,000 nurses.
It is expected to cost nearly $400 million to host 6 World Cup games here in Toronto. The price tag in Vancouver for 7 games could be as high as $600 million. The first game here in Canada goes June 12th. Sandy.
All right, CTV's Heather Wright. The man synonymous with the Invictus Games was in a London courtroom today. Prince Harry is accusing the British tabloid, the Daily Mail, of gathering news illegally.
Morning, sir. Morning, sir. Morning, Harry. Morning.
This is Harry's third battle with UK tabloids. He is joined by other celebrities, including Elizabeth Hurley, Sadie Frost, and Elton John, who issued a statement saying he was violated. The tabloid is accused of practices like bugging telephone lines and obtaining personal health records. The publisher calls the allegations, quote, preposterous smears. The legendary Italian fashion designer Valentino, credited with creating an iconic and vibrant shade famously called Valentino Red, has died. Valentino Garavani established a fashion empire after opening his first studio in Rome in 1959. His designs turned heads on runways, red carpets around the world. Valentino passed away peacefully at home, surrounded by family. He was 93. Inflation in Canada ticked up slightly last month to 2.4% compared to December 2024. That's when Ottawa implemented a GST break, which helped bring prices down. But for Canadians struggling to make ends meet, expenses are still headed in the wrong direction. CTV's Quebec Bureau Chief Geneviève Beauchemin now on the struggle at the grocery store. Hi, Geneviève.
Yes, Andy, digging into the numbers gives us a bit of a glimpse into just how much those who love things like beef, but also coffee, chocolate, and sweet treats are feeling the pinch.
In these cookies, there's a secret ingredient.
You have a passion for coffee.
I'm obsessed, a little bit. Stephanie Presta started a home business, Montreal Latte Heart, combining that shot of caffeine with another passion, baking.
So I infuse my cookies with my coffee, and the coffee makes the flavors really come out of the cookies.
But that is now a recipe for higher costs. The latest Statistics Canada inflation numbers show coffee went up 30% annually, and that sweets were also pricier.
weather variability and lower yields just means that there's less coffee beans being produced and there's more global demand. That's driving the prices up.
A similar story has unfolded for beef prices. They're up 16%. The cattle stock in Canada is low, boosting prices. Coffee and beef are the main staples that saw a 5% hike annually for grocery items. But overall, many economists see some positive signs for food inflation in the report.
If you take out beef and some of the secondary effects on proteins, take out coffee, take out a couple of other things that have had extreme weather issues, the news is relatively optimistic for food prices going forward.
For Presta, relief from rising prices could mean investing in her passions is worth all the hard work.
There were moments this Christmas where I was like, what am I doing? Why am I doing this?
With the cost of dining out getting more expensive, too, it's hard to find a treat at a sweet price. Sandy.
All right, Genevieve, thank you. While many Canadians struggle, the country's ultra-wealthy, and we're talking billionaires, are getting richer at a much faster rate than most. A new Oxfam report says the wealth of Canada's 40 richest people grew by more than 20% last year to almost $550 billion. There are at least 89 billionaires in this country, with the wealthiest 1% holding almost $1.25 trillion in wealth. And that is more than the GDP of some nations. CTV's chief financial correspondent Amanda Lang is with us now. Okay, Amanda, the report argues that the super rich, will shape world economies and create wealth inequality for countries like Canada. Oxfam calling this dangerous and unsustainable. How so? What do you think?
Oxfam isn't singling Canada out, Sandy, but it is worth noting that the number of billionaires here is growing, certainly compared to previous years. Oxfam notes that globally, a billionaire is 4,000 times more likely to hold elected office. And certainly, we know that the wealthy have a lot of influence on the politics and policies that shape nations. And that comes at a time, of course, when wealth inequality is still very much alive and well. You know, a recent survey in Canada showed that almost half of Canadians can't meet their bills. They're $200 away from not meeting their bills at the end of every month. So just $200, and they would actually fall short. That paints a picture of Canadians that are still struggling at a time, of course, when this pocket of Canadians get ever wealthier. It's no coincidence that Oxfam released this report to time with Davos, where the world's wealthy and powerful gather. And the reminder from Oxfam is to hold politicians to account for policies that benefit the broad population and spread the wealth and not just favor the wealthiest among us. Sandy.
Good point. Okay, Amanda, thank you for this insight. Still ahead, the winter wallop in Atlantic Canada. How to cope with a powerful nor'easter that's left thousands powerless. Schools are closed across Nova Scotia as a nasty nor'easter dumps snow on the region. Power is out to thousands. Driving is treacherous, with most of Atlantic Canada to be hit. CTV's Paul Hollingsworth now on the path of this major storm and the damage it's causing. Hey, Paul.
Sandy, some major highways were also closed this morning. For many parts of this region, this is the first major snowstorm of the winter, and it caused quite a mess. A stormy day in the Maritimes that saw a major nor'easter dump a lot of snow. Conditions were dangerous, and police urged people to avoid driving until the roads and highways were cleared. So many stayed home to dig out. Some areas received close to 20 centimeters, while northern Nova Scotia and Prince Edward Island had snowfall amounts in the 30-centimeter range.
And the heavy nature of the snow likely weighed on maybe some of the utility infrastructure in Nova Scotia. Some tree branches contributed to the power outages that province saw.
140,000 homes and businesses in Nova Scotia lost their power early in the morning.
Roads are starting to clear up, but there is a lot of customers that have outages and a lot of power outages that we need to get to.
Cleaning up snow mixed with rain is never an easy task.
Very heavy.
But there's an upside. Schools and universities canceled classes, paving the way for outdoor activities for people of all ages.
It's a snow day, school's closed, parents have got to work, grandparents don't have to work.
It's common for mild temperatures and heavy rainfall to come after a snowstorm in this part of the country, but that is not the case for the short-term forecast. Cold temperatures are expected to hit this region over the next several days, which means this heavy snowfall, along with icy conditions, should stick around for quite some time. Sandy.
CTV's Paul Hollingsworth. After the break, turning the page on a legacy of music. The next chapter for a star-studded student-run magazine. Some Canadian music history is getting saved for future generations. Stylus magazine, based in Winnipeg, has been singing the praises of Canadian bands since 1989. And those old issues are now going digital. CTV's Alex Carpa on the preservation project that comes as there are questions about the magazine's future.
Yeah, so this is the very first issue of Stylus magazine.
These magazines represent a blast from the past. The Stylus at the University of Winnipeg is one of the longest running student music magazines in the country. It's published by the university's Students Association, which has been printing these magazines since 1989.
It's a bygone time, right?
The archives team at the university is now currently working to digitize the past issues so they aren't forgotten about.
I'm working on the metadata for this issue of Stylus here.
This painstaking job lands in the hands of Maggie A. Clark, who is the magazine's current assistant editor.
We're also scanning every issue page by page.
Almost the entire run of magazines dating back over 36 years have been preserved, with only 2 issues missing.
There are about 210 or so issues and counting.
Digitizing and archiving hundreds of these papers here at the University of Winnipeg that span well over 3 decades comes at a time of uncertainty as it is in danger of folding. Last year, funding dropped for the magazine due to a drop in enrollment at the university.
Arts and culture is an area that is typically underfunded across Canada.
Brett Laheed says the magazine is an artifact of Winnipeg's cultural and heritage scene over the last several decades.
It gives an opportunity for students and new artists to share their work.
A new issue of the magazine was recently published, but Laheed says they only now have funding for 2 more issues in 2026, with the long-running magazine facing an uncertain future. Alex Carpa, CTV News, Winnipeg.
Thank you for sharing your time with us this Monday. I'm Sandy Ronaldo. Bye for now. We'll see you tomorrow, we hope. Have a nice evening.